SCP-7427 Fall Forever. One of the hallmarks of our modern era is our relative diligence in record keeping. These days, every major or minor event is kept track of. The weather for every city for every day is filed away somewhere, and hundreds of millions of terabytes of digital storage are being filled up every day. Whether all this information will last is another discussion, however, as nothing lasts forever. But we certainly have a greater capability and interest in maintaining records than previous civilizations. That means that it would be even a greater catastrophe, however, if that information were to all start leaking through our fingers and disappearing. SCP-7427 involves the sudden disappearance of people, places, and information, focused around 3 pieces of infamously missing SCP articles. Let's take a look. The article opens with a presentation of some text, which reads, "The night wind howls around you, whipped into a blinding flurry of snow as you speed down the hillside. The surrounding tundra, bathed in pillowy white, sheds soft reams of pearls that drift up and into the air in the wake of your snowmobile. The quiet valley below shimmers, resplendent with the light of the moon. You could almost stop and take a moment to revel in its beauty. But you can't stop. To stop now would be to die. Already the cold has wormed its way into your fingers, your toes, your teeth, threatening with each passing second to creep further until nothing more can be felt. You will your hands, trusting them to respond despite the alien lack of sensation, to tighten their grip on the handlebars. You set your sights on the facility ahead, a towering, brutalist facility, the only human structure for hundreds of miles, exclusionary Site 16. The site juts unevenly from the plains where it was constructed, a sore in the earth. Para-technology and forbidden magics brought together in a marvel of an emergency shelter. A shelter built not for mankind, but for information. It was designed to withstand the ravages of time and resist alterations to reality itself. A bulwark against falsehoods. Its annals contain not only the complete records of the Foundation, but of humanity as a whole. The ground beneath you transitions from rough terrain to the smooth conformity of tarmac, a disused airstrip blanketed with fresh snow. Hopefully, the skeleton crew that maintains the site were able to quarantine themselves within the stronghold. Hopefully, the skeleton crew that maintains the site were able to quarantine themselves within the stronghold. Hopefully. Proximity lights activate as you approach the entrance and kill the engine. At one time, you may have found the tall steel doors to be imposing, but at this point, they're a welcome sight. A keycard reader beside the door accepts your credentials. Records and Information Security Administration, Level 5 access. You take refuge in the unlit entryway, stepping around the front desk and into the hall beyond. All is quiet. A cursory look into several rooms reveals no sign of recent activity. No sign of survivors. You take a moment to retrieve a small inhaler from your rucksack, fasten it to a respirator, and press it to your face. A purplish, minty haze sprays from the device and fills the translucent mask. You breathe the Class W Nestix in deeply. The clarity it brings fortifies your mind. The elevator is functional. You board it and press the lowest button. You've several minutes of descent here. Records of Foundation affairs are contained at the lowest levels of the facility. In the stillness of the elevator, under the influence of powerful Nestix, an SCP file is called to the forefront of your mind, as clear in your recollection as if it was right in front of you. SCP-7427 refers to an anomalous meteorological phenomenon currently encompassing the entirety of the Earth. It presents physically as a blizzard that persists despite the lack of supporting weather systems, and is responsible for a worldwide reduction in average temperature by 8 degrees Celsius, or 15 degrees Fahrenheit, leading to the disruption of various ecosystems. It's estimated that over 120,000 genera have been brought to extinction as a direct result of 7427. While airborne and in motion, individual crystals of 7427 have been found to become selectively immaterial, allowing them to fall or be blown through persons and structures. The precipitation and gales of the blizzard exhibit additional effects that are deleterious to the conventional ontology, including loss of persons, loss of Locke, and loss of information. Those who are isolated will become susceptible to spontaneous cessation of existence, even occurring when individuals are still in close proximity but simply breaking line of sight. While typically occurring outdoors, exposure to 7427 precipitation is not required, as evidenced by the systematic loss of all ISS crew members across 7 weeks. High-volume locations, such as densely populated cities or housing, have wholly ceased to exist, reduced to particulate form through erosion by winds and dispersed into the atmosphere. Monuments, culturally significant architecture, and grave sites are also affected in this manner, and while many man-made structures remain standing, they are typically unpopulated and culturally insignificant. The exceptions to the population threshold are Foundation Site 41, headquarters of the Anti-Memetics Division, Site 87, whose personnel boast an above-average cognitohazard resistance value, and Facility Q13, the leading producer of Nestix. 7427's emergence coincided with the loss of countless files in the Foundation databases and physical stores, including video files, audio files, and printed works. This loss manifests as complete and irreversible erasure, as if the information were never recorded. Hard drives are wiped, books become blank, vinyl records lose their grooves, and so forth. Through cross-referencing remaining data stores, testimonies of RISA personnel, and AI conscript records, it was found that in the hours leading up to 7427's emergence, 3 SCP files in particular were flagged for the retroactive non-existence of essential components. The first is SCP-087, a stairwell within a school campus that descends indefinitely and which is inhabited by both a malevolent force and the audible crying of a small child. The affected file was the last of 4 recorded D-Class explorations into the stairwell. The second is SCP-783, a predatory entity that emerges every 12 years in a small English hamlet, trapping lone citizens indoors overnight to stalk and mutilate them. There's also a mass grave of its victims buried beneath the town that leads into a spatially anomalous replica of the area. The affected file is one detailing a doctor's expedition into the replica of the village. The third SCP is SCP-610, a contagious, mutagenic skin virus affecting a large region in southern Siberia, responsible for the infection, mutation, and death of all extant life forms in its radius. The affected document is the 6th exploration record, depicting the investigation into the anomaly's origin point. We're then given a note from Dr. Cynthia Sommer, a senior researcher with the Anti-Memetics Division, discussing 7427. It reads, "You learn a lot about reading between the lines in my profession. Not literally, of course, but in the sense that when the very nature of what you study actively resists perception, define understanding of what is and is not, one has to be able to think sideways. That last part can actually be literal. It is an impossible task to describe that which is ineffable, but one can conceive an outline around it if only one looks from the proper angle. Alongside the Department of Analytics, our team has been studying affected zones, persons, information, and events affected by SCP-7427. We have concluded that secondary SCP-7427 effects do not trigger indiscriminately. Through investigating gaps in the historical record, reviewing census data, and compiling satellite footage of impacted zones, a rough outline of SCP-7427 affected concepts has been constructed. There is a pattern. It seems to pick and choose, flowing from one person to a family member or associate, flitting from a shared experience and targeting a historical event, using that as a platform to eliminate a geographic location. The selective nature mimics the hunting patterns of typical infovores. We've bested those before. SCP-7427 may seem insurmountable, but what it gains through omnipresence, it loses in precision. Regardless of what SCP-7427 eliminates, it is not thorough enough to affect memory. If it did, this file wouldn't exist. We wouldn't even die screaming. We'd die never knowing anything had gone wrong at all. It's about damn time an anomaly's incompatibility with the human mind worked in our favor. Perception defines reality. That's our ace in the hole. SCP-7427 hasn't been able to affect personnel on Nestic regimens because of their heightened ability to define themselves as conscious observers. Concrete webs of memories and experiences forming a lattice of identity, an unassailable internal narrative. We're close to picking apart exactly what makes SCP-7427 tick, but we need to pin down its source. If we can determine the concepts it modeled itself on, we'll be able to engineer a counter-meme, and we can finally shut the book on this whole damn mess. Clear skies lay ahead. We're then given some more text from the perspective of the individual going into the exclusionary site, which reads, "The soft ding of the elevator breaks your concentration. You arrive in a dank, poorly lit antechamber. A single door stands across from you, ajar. A steel plate affixed to the wall beside it reads, Files, SCP-002, SCP-999. Crossing the threshold, you're struck by the musty aroma of old paper and moisture-regulated air. The files in here represent the oldest in the Foundation's annals, long predating the era digitation and advent of SkipNet. Thankfully, if you've been in one Foundation archive, you've been in them all. You make a beeline for the back of the room, brushing aside the occasional cobweb as you dart past countless floor-to-ceiling cabinets. There is only one file you need to find. One file that may be the linchpin to ending the storm. The cabinets lining the back wall contain files for SCP-002 through 099. You roll a ladder over to the drawer marked 080 to 089, pull it out by at least a solid yard, and start rifling through. Genome sequencing for SCP-081, the transcript of a play authored by SCP-082, interviews with Cassie. Near the very back of the drawer, you finally find it. SCP-087 and its associated files. The first few are mundane. The criminal history of the D-Class used in experimentation, amnesticization records for civilians, and expenditure reports. A hand-typed copy of the SCP file itself lies at the end of the stack. Appended to it are exploration logs 1, 2, 3, and there, exactly where it should be, the final log. You turn the page to document number 087-4 and begin to read. The fourth exploration log for SCP-087 features a 26-year-old male D-Class with an athletic build, possessing several years of experience as a volunteer professional with Yosemite Park's Wilderness Search and Rescue Team. He is provided with a rescue harness, an extra lamp, emergency flares, and provisions to sustain a day-long excursion, as well as recording equipment. The feed opens as the door is closed behind him, with the light fixture next to the door being the only source of light within SCP-087. The D-Class begins to descend into darkness, which sharply cuts off the light at the first step, and he remarks that they aren't paying him enough for this shit. The doctor back at control asks him if he's ready to make his descent, as he drops a flare down the side of the railing, which fails to even illuminate the flight of stairs immediately below him. He asks if they offer profit sharing and says that he'll need to see their plans for vision and dental. The doctor reprimands him and asks again if he's ready to make his descent, and he begins to do so, remarking that he's just making light of it. As he chuckles to himself, he activates his headlamp, which illuminates roughly half of the flight ahead of him. He continues descending, noting that this isn't too bad, as he thought the stairs would just continue all in one direction, and how much it would suck to trip and tumble down infinite stairs. As he makes it down to the third flight, he stops suddenly and looks down over the railing. He asks if they hear that, and begins shouting, asking if someone is hurt. He tells Control that he hears a kid down there that doesn't seem to be responding, and asks if that's their rescue. The doctor tells him to continue, as that's consistent with previous subjects' experiences. The D-Class mocks this, asking if he can talk to a real person, but he continues. He asks how deep this stairwell is, but the doctor doesn't respond. As he continues, a pale white face is seen clearly in the darkness above him, but he passes without noting it. The doctor finally responds, saying that that's yet to be determined, and they're hoping he can help them answer that. The D-Class continues to descend for 15 more minutes, making it down to the 96th landing, before he asks if they know who the kid is. The doctor replies that he has a rescue harness because there's a possibility that there's a lost child down there, but they cannot be certain of it at this time. The D-Class asks if it could be a recording then, or something that sounds like a child, like mimesis. The doctor explains that the latter is within the realm of possibility, although there's far too much deviation in verbiage and tone for it to be a looped recording, and he thinks that the word he's looking for is mimetic. Mimetic is used in a biological sense, while mimesis is more to do with artistic representation, the imitation of life and nature through mediums such as paint or poetry. The D-Class pauses to peer over the railing and tells the doctor to let him hold on to the hope that it is mimesis, as he'd much rather find a painting down there than something pretending to be a person. The doctor continues to say that mimesis wasn't seen as entirely harmless, as Plato, for example, opined that the arts were incapable of imparting truth, a falsification of reality. He saw it as something capable of leading to immorality, an indulgence of passion. The doctor certainly seems like someone fun at parties, and the D-Class remarks that he would have asked him about art theory 30 floors ago if he knew that's what it took to open him up. He asks if he's ever thought about teaching, leading the doctor to quip that no, as his employer offers unrivaled vision and dental. The D-Class laughs, but it's cut off by the grating screech of rending metal. The camera jerks wildly as the D-Class looks about in a panic, and the doctor asks if he's alright. He says that he's fine, and thinks that it came from somewhere down below him. He calms down as he continues descending for the next 10 minutes, leading to the discovery of a new deviation on the 163rd floor. Before him is a series of glinting points in the darkness of the flight below, reflecting the light of his torch despite their occlusion in the dark of the stairwell. His gaze remains fixed as he slowly advances, glancing away momentarily to check his footing. He leads with his left foot in a sidestep, body half-turned, prepared to run. Several jet-black protrusions come slowly into view, with ragged, sharp metallic points that glisten in the approaching light. The metal railing on either side of the stairwell has been violently twisted and bent, with some sections split along their length, while others are torn clean from the concrete, leaving cracks along the walls and edge of the stairs. The longest sections twist and extrude well into the D-Class's path, with jagged ends turned towards him. The doctor asks if he's able to proceed, and he carefully approaches, glancing in all directions. He sidesteps, stooping below and between mangled portions of the railing, and the camera catches a bright white point on the stairway above him. Coming to a stop, he focuses on it, seeing the pale white face unmoving. He asks the doctor to tell him what the hell he's looking at, as the face begins to slowly advance. Though it is not known to possess a body, it moves at a staggered pace, quivering before pausing and quivering again, as if it is ambulating downwards one step at a time. The D-Class begins hyperventilating and doubles his pace, while the doctor yells for him to remain calm and withdraw. The face continues to descend, with the darkness appearing to move with it, slowly cutting off the D-Class's illumination. The D-Class continues to try and push through the obstruction, but the entity catches up to him. The camera catches a squelching noise, followed by the D-Class's cry of anguish. The face stares into the camera as the D-Class screams, before vanishing. The darkness recedes, and the doctor hesitantly asks if the D-Class is okay. He eventually groans, and the camera shows a sharpened, thin bit of railing glistening red as he groans that it went clean through his shoulder. He proceeds to unpack some of his first aid gear and patches up his shoulder, which is heavily bleeding. He uses a flare to cauterize it shut, and patches up a gash below his knee, before exclaiming about when they were going to tell him that he had company. He asks what it is, and the doctor says that they don't know, and he's just in the dark as the D-Class is. The D-Class laughs and then groans in pain, and the doctor just says that its presence tends to unnerve, but they have no clear record of it causing direct harm. The D-Class compares it to Scooby-Doo, with the entity trying to scare him away, and that means that there's something it's trying to scare him away from. He figures that there has to be a bottom, and there has to be a missing kid, so he begins quickening his pace downwards. There has to be an ending, and an answer, otherwise what's the point? The doctor likes his determination, but he may be assuming intent when there very well could be none. The D-Class pauses and says that someone doesn't go out of their way to make all of this, just to leave it unfinished. He continues his descent for a further 2 hours, before taking a 20-minute break on the 387th landing, before continuing for another hour and a half. He's approaching the lowest point recorded so far, the 633rd floor, and the doctor tells him that he's 2.4 kilometers beneath the entrance. As he takes a step down towards the next flight, the entity comes into view, waiting on the landing below. The D-Class pauses and says that he's got a plan, but he'll need the doctor's help to be his eyes. He begins shakily descending, hand on the railing, and says that if all it can do is spook him when he sees it, he figures he could just not look. As he descends, the face can be seen with more and more clarity, and it seems as if it is not looking at the D-Class, but rather directly into the camera. Static flickers at the edge of the screen, and a high-pitched, almost inaudible sound buzzes continually. The doctor tells the D-Class to take a break, but the D-Class insists that they're finishing this. He can be heard speaking more, but his speech is buried beneath a shrill din. The face in the darkness contorts into an approximation of anger, filling the frame as the D-Class nears. The shrill din intensifies into a blaring, grating note, and there is a sound of a dull thud as the doctor removes his earpiece, throwing it down. On screen, the picture splices into an unintelligible whirl of black and white as the camera seems to come into physical contact with the entity. In an instant, it is gone, and the audio-visual anomalies cease. The D-Class has made it safely to the next landing, seemingly oblivious, and the doctor retrieves his earpiece. He hears the D-Class say something about why he's always had a problem with commitment, and tells him that he can open his eyes now. He begins looking around and complains that he was pouring his heart out because he thought he was about to die, and the doctor wasn't even listening. The doctor says that that's beside the point, and congratulates him on his plan working. The D-Class continues descending, while in the control room, the doctor leans forward in his seat, adjusting his glasses as the lights around him begin to flicker. The person reading this document notes that they shouldn't be able to witness anything in the control room, as that wouldn't have been included in the transcript. The doctor asks someone else what's going on with the lights, before realizing that the rest of his team is entirely gone. The facility lights begin to malfunction, casting the control room in near darkness. Several monitors continue to operate, but their displays are overtaken by a cascade of error messages. Each screen casts a sickly cone of light across the otherwise pitch-black room. The doctor exclaims as the D-Class asks what's going on. The area illuminated by the monitors begins to recede, as if their light cannot escape the immediate surface of their screens, leaving each as a single point of white in the black of the facility. One by one, each screen blinks out in turn, until nothing further can be seen. The pleading voice of a crying child can be heard, and the doctor states that it's here. The D-Class asks what he means, and the doctor says that the darkness, everything, it's here. The individual reading the document notes that SCP-087 is among the oldest files declassified to new recruits, and they know for a fact that it never broke containment. They flip to the first page to confirm that they are in fact reading the right file, which they are. They flip back then, and become aware of how many pages are still left, wondering if there were that many to begin with. The D-Class tells the doctor that he's going to be alright, asking if he has a light source on him. The doctor just whimpers as the D-Class quickens his descent down the stairwell. He yells for the doctor to snap out of it, and the doctor says that he has a phone, but he can't find it. The D-Class reassures him that it's okay, and if that thing is out there, it can't hurt him. He asks if anyone knows where he is, and if help is on the way. The doctor replies that security does, but they should have been here by now. The D-Class rapidly descends down flights of steps, stating that the thing just doesn't want them to finish this. Within the control room, an orbit of maroon light falls from above, a lit flare in its center. As the room is momentarily cast in its light, it can be seen that the interior has shifted dramatically, the floor bending and sloping upwards and downwards away from where the doctor is cowering. At the center of the room is a deep, dark, unrelenting expanse. The doctor looks about his surroundings in a panic in the fleeting moment that sight is possible before the flare continues its journey down into the pit below. The doctor screams and begs for help as the pleading voice within the stairwell grows louder, becoming in sync with the doctor. The D-Class shouts that he's going to get him out of there, charging down the flights of steps now. The pleading grows louder and louder as he makes his way to the 633rd floor, where he suddenly stops. On the ground lies a mess of shredded fabric, the remains of a standard-issue D-Class uniform. It's draped in tatters over a chalk-white, desiccated human form. It's shriveled, wrinkled, wet. Its dermis flakes and peels away. Its limbs bend in pained, unnatural directions. It stretches, twists. The body stretches and winds down the stairs, upper torso out of sight around the bend. The D-Class gags and retches uncontrollably over the side of the railing. Eventually he recovers and cautiously follows the gnarled and crooked shape as it bends down and down, flight after flight after flight, ever deeper. You know it never ended, never finished. The voice of the pleading child grows in volume. He follows the gnarled, twisted spine ever deeper, another 100 floors, 1,000 more. It's as he slows, as his bones ache and his muscles give out, that a jagged shoulder blade comes into view on the flight below. The upper body of the nameless victim comes into focus. You cannot make out the details of its face, but you know it is wrenched in a silent scream. A mangled, outstretched arm reaches out, as if the victims spent their final, excruciating moments clawing their way forward. Just outside the reach of its hand, a sheaf of papers rests upon the landing. The D-Class ignores it as you begin to read. A snowflake lands on the back of your finger, melting into an innocuous bead that draws a path down the curvature of your hand and drips onto the page. That leads us into the third field log for SCP-783, detailing Dr. Lafayette's expedition into the alternate reality of Tembe. At exactly 2 a.m., power is activated in the mobile control room at the Tembe portal, despite investigations having been suspended by command. 3 sets of recording instruments are turned on, and Lafayette walks in front of the camera at the Tembe opening, their hair disheveled and their clothes stained with a dark substance. They raise both their hands and curl their fingers one by one, counting down from 10. After curling their last finger, several explosions happen in quick succession in Tembe proper, with smoke and flames seen rising in the distance. Lafayette dons the exploration headset while maintaining eye contact with the camera, then turns to descend into the portal. Someone is sobbing. The headset camera is largely obscured during the descent, but in addition to the noise of shifting dirt, the microphone picks up the sound of loud, albeit muffled, human moans. These sounds grow louder as Lafayette descends further, their breath remaining soft and steady. The sky comes into view as Lafayette emerges into the anomalous facsimile of Tembe, and although there are no stars, the moon is full, despite there not being a full moon in Tembe proper. Long, cylindrical objects extend from the ground and stretch high into the air, seemingly without end, waving slightly in the wind. Human mouths can be seen on several of the protrusions. Lafayette begins walking towards the tree line, and the sound of moaning grows softer. As the camera moves steadily through the forest, distended limbs can occasionally be seen twitching on the ground. As Lafayette travels, a second set of footsteps can be heard, with an unusually long pause between them, yet growing louder. A shadow cast by the moonlight bobs in and out of frame, its figure long and bent. A different voice interrupts the log, asking, "What is it you think you're doing?" This isn't how the story goes. The voice states that Lafayette stops and turns to face me, but the log states that Lafayette continues walking forward, offering no acknowledgement of the other presence. Apart from the 2 sets of footsteps, no signs of life can be heard. A building can be seen in the distance through the trees. The lights are on. It's not Tembe. Long cylindrical protrusions branch from the windows and wind lazily into the sky. Somewhere in the house, music plays. Similar protrusions can be seen from the surrounding structures. The streets are cobbled and old. The cars are broken and dirty. What little illumination the streetlights could offer is broken by countless long, thin shadows cast from every direction. Further into town, the buildings start to appear slightly taller than in baseline. The town gives way to nature, and there again is a hole resembling the portal to Tembe, and as seen in the previous excursions, it lacks the presence of extended limbs seen in the prime iteration. The other voice says that it's not for lack of trying, of course. The others just didn't take. It took a long time. There's a wet, popping sound and Lafayette looks down. Several of their ribs have extended out of their chest and through their clothes, crooking sharply at the end. Lafayette's body folds in on itself with a sickening crunch, then again, and then again. They collapse in a broken heap and never get up. The actual log, however, says that the night is still, and Lafayette's gaze remained fixed forward. Their steps remain even and constant, but the trees are moving past the camera faster now. Before long, they're in Tembe again, although a different one. The buildings are newer and taller, the cars are older in model, and the streets are longer, winding in sharp turns that shouldn't have been there. The shapes stretching out from the windows are too many to count, and too distorted to identify who or what they might have been. They're just shapes now, reaching out toward the sky, shifting slightly in the wind. There isn't any wind. Past the edge of town again, another empty hole. More trees, taller than they should be. More buildings, taller than they should be. A hole, empty. Trees, taller, bent near the top. Buildings, taller, tilted sharply. A hole, pitiful. Trees, taller, bent. Buildings, taller, bent. A hole, trees, buildings. A failure. The cycle continues. On and on it goes, again and again. No respite, no relief. It all stops mattering after a while. It did for me. It will for you. Time slips away as Lafayette makes their way through the various iterations of Tembe, each one older than the last. The low hum of electric street lamps gives way to the hiss of gaslight, which eventually gives way to the crackle of open flames. Trees zigzag into the air as far as the eye can see, trunks bent at angles so sharp that they'd slice right through you. It should have been sunrise years ago, but the moon remains fixed in place in the starless sky. A baby cries in the distance, the pitch of its voice rising and falling in irregular and unnatural modulations. Someone is still sobbing. The sound of footsteps is mingled with harsh, ragged breathing. Lafayette's breathing remains soft and steady. Eventually, Tembe is no more, or more accurately, hasn't been yet. It won't be for a long time. All that can be seen are conical mounds of earth fashioned into crude facsimiles of human civilization, positioned in a broad circle around an open clearing. Lafayette comes to a stop. The other voice states that a deal's a deal. Long, thin shapes slowly creep along the ground from every direction. Some end in feet, others in hands, hair, nails. Most are no longer recognizable as any part of a greater whole. They creak as they stretch, ever gradually converging toward the center of the clearing. Lafayette glances briefly downward, shaking their leg free of a tangle of errant fingers. The malformed tubes of humanity converge. They begin to snap and bend, but not like before. The breaks are regular, almost organized. The distended tendrils press close to one another, shooting upward, then sharply forward and up again, and to the side. Slowly but surely, a spiral staircase starts to form. Lafayette approaches, and with each step taken, another step is formed as the unrecognizable streaks of flesh grow ever longer. The baby's cries grow louder. And so a tower is formed where an empty clearing once was. The tower shivers slightly in the wind that isn't there. A pulse still beats in every inch of flesh. Up and down the tower, rows and columns of taut skin gleam in the moonlight, like spider's silk. Lafayette crests the top of the tower. Strands of flesh at the center of the platform have twisted into a small wicker crib. Something writhes inside. K9-121, the Dutch shepherd dog from the previous excursion, stands alert beside the crib. It keeps its gaze trained on Lafayette, but does not move from its position. As the camera moves closer to the crib, a small, visually normal infant can be seen crying within. Lafayette gingerly reaches in and takes the child into their arms. They brush the side of its face with the back of their hand. And then they turn around, but there was no one there. With the child cradled in their arms and the dog at their heels, Lafayette steps towards the stairs to begin the descent. Flesh and bone shift and retract. The stairs pull down and forward like an escalator, gently carrying the three back toward the ground as the tower comes apart. The dog whimpers slightly, and the child continues to cry. The descent is over in a matter of seconds. Fast, effortless, and safe. When they reach the ground, it begins to shake. The road home is long and treacherous. Lafayette breaks into a run, clutching the child closely to their chest. The dog barks at something off camera, and far above the moon is oblong and distorted. Each time it reemerges from the tree canopy, it is slightly longer, growing steadily with each passing moment until it fully wraps from horizon to horizon. The child cries harder, and the ground shakes harder still. Lafayette almost stumbles, but rights himself and carries on. They shush the infant softly, but to no avail. The moon arches over the earth a second time, forming another straight line across the night sky next to the first. The child cries harder, and the ground shakes harder still. The moon is crossing the sky in stripes. The earth gives a thunderous heave, and Lafayette falls and rolls, shielding the child with their body as sharp, jagged grass cuts them in 100 tiny places. The trees above weave through the air, tying sharp, jagged knots about each other and running sharp, jagged laps around the moonstripe, choking out its remaining light little by little. The night grows far too long, and the world grows far too twisted, and it all starts to become far too much. But then a sharp, jagged thought goes through the doctor's mind. They ask the child if it would like to hear a story, and for just a moment the child's screams hitch. For just a moment the ground no longer shakes. Lafayette strokes the thin hairs on the infant's head, and the dog curls up beside them, as sharp, jagged cracks crisscross the ground on every side. Somewhere far away, someone is laughing. Lafayette pulls the child close and begins to whisper a story. The world goes strangely still, and you hear every word. The letters seethe and bleed, smearing on the tips of your fingers and biting at the edges of your vision. A frigid draft breathes through the quiet archives, turning the page. That leads us into the last document, the 6th file for SCP-610, detailing the investigation into the origin point of the flesh virus, filmed from the perspective of assault team members separated during an altercation with the infected. Contact was re-established with the team members who fell into the underground river currents 5 hours after the previous exploration. The majority of contact consisted of video and audio transmitted from the team's onboard recording devices. It's unclear whether the team members were aware they were still transmitting, as they made no active efforts to communicate with command before falling out of range. Analysis of the footage indicates that 9 of the 13 missing team members survived their initial journey, as the remaining 4 do not appear in any available footage. Footage begins with team members struggling to stay afloat as they travel down the river current, video commonly being obscured by impact with rocks and water on the lens. Cries of alarms and distress can be heard, but are distorted by volume and proximity to the microphone. Despite the turbulent nature of the currents, the majority of the team appeared to be keeping their heads above water, except for one who is floating face down. As they continue to struggle, the color of the water around them visibly changes to a dark red. This is theorized to be runoff from SCP-610 infected individuals elsewhere in the cavern. The stone walls of the cavern begin to be replaced with bleeding scabs of putrid, oozing meat. One of the squad members vomits, and it mingles with his drowning. Another opens their mouth to scream and dooms themselves. The filth carries them onwards. The current of the river begins to shift, and the group falls upwards into SCP-610-L5. Magic circles and mysterious churches loom around the group. Several of their number are smeared across a sequence of events. Someone is screaming into their communicator for assistance, but the coherence of events has long since been lost. They have slipped out of their source. The filth carries them onwards, the currents of the river. No, not a river. A vein, a bleeding pathway of the world, pulls them upwards into SCP-610-L4. The team members shout and beg incoherently as they are squeezed through circuit boards and video logs. One unfortunate tries to reach out with her hand, only to have it shredded in the boundary between observer and subject. They expire from blood loss soon after, despite the veritable amounts of blood in their surroundings. Such irony. They are on course now, and cannot be saved. The filth carries them onwards, kicking and screaming, even as the dimensions of the vein continue to grow stronger, their bones crushed by cartilage pressing in. They are deep now in the guts of their existence. They are pulled upwards into SCP-610-L3. One team member seizes the boundary between the two layers of the world and is bisected when that boundary shifts. What is left of him is dragged outside. The group is stretched across the exploration of a dead zone, pulled up through rotted air into the sky. As they pass into the layer of clouds above and re-enter the cardiovascular system of the universe, an engorged human head can be seen emerging from the cavity below. It screams up at them. They scream down at it. The filth carries them onwards. Most of the team are spent, little more than flailing dolls surrendered to the whims of the current. Someone is laughing. The team is dragged into SCP-610-L2 through explosions and bloody constructs in a long, empty journey, their limbs slamming upon the edges of conceptualities as they go. Fingers drag desperately along a sphere of flesh, but the sphere simply snatches those fingers away and allows the rest of their bodies to fly off unrescued. One of them chooses to pray while they still have the prerequisite lips. The filth carries them onwards. Only one of the team members still has enough of themselves remaining to be considered a human being. He's crying, begging, gibbering pathetically. He floats through a world of flesh within flesh, twisted organs and protrusions dancing around him, blood pouring from all things capable of pouring. He opens his eyes, but he has long since gone blind. He strikes the ceiling above him and smashes through. The filth carries him onwards. He smashes through the description. He smashes through the special containment procedures. He smashes through the object class. With a flayed and emaciated hand, he reaches out and grasps the item number, holding on desperately to the edge of the hash. It's a worthless maneuver. He squeezes his eyes shut to hide from the absence around him, but the absence is there whether he likes it or not. His fingers slip and break away. His legs break off in the winds of anti-creation, and he is dragged onwards by the emptiness. He falls outside, into the space where nothing is written. He opens his eyes, as his eyelids wilt like dying flowers. He bears witness. Behold, a mouth of 7 teeth, each gnarled as a tree, each gargantuan as a planet, encloses itself around the world of the last man. The shape of it is not something he is made for, but he understands hunger. He understands that all he knows will not be enough to sate it. He looks at it, and it looks at him, and he knows that does not make a difference to his fate. The last man was doomed from the moment he was born. You open your mouth to scream, but sound has already been devoured. You try to get away, but distance has already been devoured. You try to despair, but thought has already been devoured. The jaws of the mal deity snap shut. Alright, so if you're anything like me, you're scratching a hole into your head after all that. We started with a simple enough premise. Some sort of global anomaly that's erasing people, locations, and information in the form of a big blizzard. A person went to a Foundation exclusionary site, where information is kept safe from any outside anomalies, to read up on 3 files that were apparently erased by the blizzard right before it started. These 3 files were, of course, some of the most famously unfinished documents across the SCP Wiki, belonging to SCP-087, 783, and 610. What follows seems to start normally enough, showing the final log of SCP-087, but soon descends into, essentially, madness. What ties all this together is the fact that this article was written for a remix event for the Wiki, in which authors were encouraged to reimagine or remix classic SCP articles in new ways. The SCP that was remixed for this one was none other than SCP-2727, as above, so below. I covered this one in my pataphysics video if you want a fuller breakdown, but essentially 2747 describes, or rather doesn't describe, a phenomenon known as the anafabula. The anafabula is essentially an anti-narrative, in that if manifested through certain tropes or themes being present in a narrative, it will devour the narrative and move up through the layers of reality that contained the narrative. The tropes and themes that seem to be correlated to the anafabula are things like darkness, shadows, black objects, the number 7, and thorns. The anafabula is especially dangerous to the Foundation, as they know that they are basically fictional, in the sense that they are aware that there are narrative levels above and below them. If the anafabula were to manifest and devour narratives below them, it could climb upwards and devour the Foundation's reality. It seems that it managed to consume and destroy the missing logs from the 3 SCPs, leading it to create the blizzard across the Foundation's reality, slowly erasing people, places, and information until there was practically nothing left. The only thing that was left was the exclusionary site and the individual that went there to try and figure it out, but it was far too late. The jaws of the mal deity snapped shut, and reality was no more. I think it's one of those articles that could be appreciated more on a second read-through, once you know exactly what it's meant to be about, but there is a pretty clear ending here, where the Foundation isn't going to bounce back. In fact, it's rare to see the Foundation's universe end with such finality, without any glimmer of hope, but that's what makes the anafabula one of the most terrifying villains the universe has to offer. Learning that you exist within a narrative is one thing, but having it be erased from the page is another.